This is April Federico, and welcome back to Brownies for Breakfast. And today I awaken along with my podcast just in time for spooky season. So, this is a very special episode because today I am here with Mia Zambarano, licensed social worker, mental health therapist, and lifestyle and performance consultant. Hi, Mia.
Hi, April. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So I understand that you work primarily with college and athletics. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. And you recently spoke with Lynn University. And what did you notice? And well, first let us start by asking, what does performance mean to you in terms of mental health and
Yeah.
nutrition, hydration, all that fun stuff?
I love that question. So, as a therapist, right, the focus is functionality. And throughout my many years as a therapist, I acquired all of this incredible information on helping people. And it's evidence-based research, modalities, strategies. And what I really did was I took that information and I learned how to start applying it to not just functioning, but really performing and showing up as you want to at your greatest potential for each and everything you do. I was getting to a point with my clients where they were functioning, they were doing well, and then it was time to stop working because they were okay. And I was like, wait, this is the fun part. Like, you want to know how to do more, like, you want to take that next step, or you want to unapologetically pursue something. So that was where the consultation piece of my work really came in. Now, performing, to answer your question, I think everything we do is a performance, right? If you look at the very basic definition, it's how you show up to an event, interaction, basically the quality of how you're showing up. So we are performing in our relationships, we're performing in our self-care, we're performing in our work. It really across the board, anything you do is a form of performing for me. So that's why I took a special interest to this. And as a former Division I college athlete myself, I know a thing or two about performing. So, it's just something that I felt very familiar. It's very like near and dear to me. So I took a special interest in college athletes. I feel like it's a very underserved population. You have this group of people that are undergoing a huge transition in terms of just high school to college, right? I think a lot of us can relate to the intensity of that transition. How am I not just getting by, but how am I performing at my highest, whether it's academics or, in the classroom or on the field? And while they have the support, maybe cognitively in the classroom, and they have the support athletically in the, on the field, like you typically, if you're a college athlete, you've trained almost your whole life for that, right? I'm sure there's exceptions, but like it's not new to you. And of course, that's a huge transition in the intensity of what you're asking of your body. Most have not come close to even training as hard as they do when they become a college athlete. But what we forget about is your mindset. If you're asking that much of your body, you're also asking that much of your mind because they're completely connected. And that is where my niche developed, was saying like, hey, wait a second, we have no kind of baseline of how to cope with that, of how to manage that. And when we go through a difficult change or transition or something's new, it feels insecure and uncertain. So we lean more into the defensive and the fear-based. And if you're going to be a successful athlete at that level, it does not serve you anymore. So that's really what I hone into in my work with performance.
Yeah, amazing response there. And yeah, how important is it for students, especially college students, to maintain their mental health while in college? I mean, regardless whether they're in athletics or not, because
Yeah.
I remember when I was in college, which was not too
Hmm.
long ago, I um I started out as a science major,
Yeah.
and this is where I start to share my own little personal story. But
Yeah. Please.
yeah, and so I started out as a chemistry major, and I found myself really stubborn in terms of asking for help.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which was a dumb thing to do. And I wound up switching to biology because I just really did not like calculus. So I know that's like a really stupid reason to switch majors, but it's true. And
I wouldn't call it stupid though. I think so many people go through that. It's this, I'm supposed to have it together. This is supposed to be fine. Like, most people go to college and they do just fine. Like, yeah, it's stressful, and there's so much self-judgment that steeps into your point with like mental health. It's essential. Nothing's going to function on top of that if you don't have your basics. And that goes back to kind of what especially your work that you do with nutrition. If you don't have the foundational baseline, like if you don't have that, what you're putting onto it, it's like playing a really intense game of Jenga. And we don't want to play Jenga when it comes to like our lifestyle and our well-being. It's like at some point something's going to give.
yeah,
So, there is that like, we go to college and we have these tough experiences and we're being challenged in the classroom, we're being challenged otherwise. If you don't maintain your mental health, it's going to crumble. Like we have mental health just like we have physical health. You would never question someone for going to the gym to make sure they were healthy. But when it comes to mental health, there's this shame of like, I should be fine. And that's where a lot of us falter.
that's so true. Yeah, I didn't think about that at the time when I was a freshman in college.
Of course not.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, like I thought like everything was supposed to be fine. I'm supposed to be like tip top perfect and like
Mhm.
which obviously is not attainable regardless of like how you performed in say high school.
It's
And
just a totally different ballgame.
oh, I know, right? Yeah. And but regardless, I was very much stubborn in terms of getting help when I needed it.
Mhm.
Because like I've seen a therapist since I was 15 years old. So when I
Mhm.
was a freshman in high school. And it took me a month to actually see someone at the college I was at the time, in terms of my anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And what's weird is that I kind of like tricked myself into thinking that like my depression was gone,
Yeah.
which obviously is like you can't really get rid of it. It's kind of always there.
You manage it,
Yeah, you
right? Like
manage it.
you manage it. Mhm.
Yeah, and yeah, but like regardless of how stubborn you are, I think it's important that you do get the help that you need. And
Yeah.
um and like what do you think? Um I mean, it is important it's obviously important to get mental health help in college, regardless if you're in athletics or not. Is that
Oh,
true?
yeah, absolutely. Of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're human at the end of the day. And like I said, I think, we're starting to talk about it more. I still don't think it's where it needs to be. I hope that it gets there. But I think what happens is with physical health, right? There's kind of like very tangible, specific outcomes, right? You can see it's not always about losing weight or your BMI or this, that, or the other thing, but there's kind of like a specific direct, like visual outcome sometimes, right? Or there's something kind of more measurable as we feel. Now, there are measurable ways to attend to your mental health, but a lot of people are not aware of that. So it's like this kind of foreign concept for so many of us of like, physically, yeah, I can justify I want to do X, Y, and Z. Again, you wouldn't wait till God forbid you had a heart attack or something to start taking care of your health. I mean, some people I might get to that point, but like hopefully it's something you're consistently attending to, right? With your nutrition, with your sleep, with it's stuff we've been preached about our whole lives, right? You
Yeah.
go through your elementary school and middle school and you have all these subjects, you have a health class, you have, all these other things, but nowhere is specifically mental health talked about to an extent where you actually know what to do about it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you talk about the presence of mental health, but you're never directed on like how to interpret your emotions, how to cope with them. So I think that you're kind of a lot of us are put in a deficit unless you actually are one in an environment that's familiar with it, or two, you actually pursue that yourself. If I hadn't been a psych major and I wasn't interested in that, I wouldn't know these things, right? I just
Right.
wouldn't. So it's like, I feel like it's something that does us a huge disservice. So normalizing that we all have mental health, which is really just like, again, a state of being for your mentality,
Yeah.
just like your physical health is a state of being for your physicality. It's the same,
Exactly.
it's on the same level. We just don't attend to one like we do the other. So in terms of again, going back to your question, like how important is it? It's essential because if we don't attend to it, then by the time you do, it's because something's wrong and you're playing catch up. And then it's like this uncomfortable relationship with your own mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was gonna ask you, because in high school I was a 3-season college athlete, 3-season runner.
Hmm.
And so I would say I was in better shape than I am now. I and so what would you say to high school students who are possibly making the switch from being an athlete in high school to being a non-athletic regular person in
A narc.
NARP?
That is the unofficial terminology. Yeah, that's an interesting point. A lot of what I work with is the transition from being a college athlete to no longer being involved in athletics. And there's the identity crisis. There's and it's probably similar in certain ways. So to your point, I think what happens is you have such a structured schedule, right? There's so much structure. And especially if you're someone who has any type of anxiety or depression, that is huge. You have a built-in
Yeah,
support system. You have accountability. You have a safe place. You have your exercise. All of that's kind of built in. And even if you think about a high school schedule as opposed to a college schedule or a work schedule, it's so much more regimented for you, right? Like you
right.
know that the bell rings every morning at the same time, and you have to be there because otherwise you get a late slip or whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
So there's such a different accountability if you go from being a high school athlete, especially if you're performing at a high level, like you said, you're a 3-season athlete. Um, you lose that, right? Like
right.
lose that accountability. And just even going from a structured school day to, like, you might have one class one day, that impacts you, not having that built-in structure a lot of the time. So what I would say to that population, if you are a high school student that transition, or maybe you're on the back end of things, like what happened, where did things go awry, just being able to be gentle with yourself, but to acknowledge that a lot of these things are built in, and it's really taking inventory of what you need and what served you and trying to find ways to implement that yourself. Your nutrition is going to look different as you get older, and as your exercise regimen looks different. Your sleep patterns are going to look different. Your exercise, again, if you're not having that built in, how are you holding yourself accountable? It's not something you just had to do. You enjoyed doing it, but how are you going to create a space to enjoy it now so that you're consistent, so you are still attending to your health? As we said before, your mind and body are completely connected. If you're not attending to one, you're affecting the other. So that's, like, I very much preach both, not just as an athlete and a therapist, but just in general. So that's really what I would say, is just understanding that there is a bit more of a responsibility to take on, and that you can still have that structure and that wellness. You just have to put the effort forth. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, there's always support in being able to do that. Don't feel like
Yeah.
you have to do it on your own.
Yeah, and touching back on what you said earlier about how there's this sort of stigma of getting help.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how would you respond to that? Like in terms of like because I know there's like hashtag end the stigma on
Yeah.
going around
Yeah.
on social media.
Yeah.
And fun fact, I actually just became a provider on Zant, which actually um helps out college students. It was originally coined when one of the founding members' friends, trigger warning, died by suicide. And
Mhm.
she and her friends immediately just like started this whole company that has taken years to build, but
That's
it's
amazing.
coming to fruition today, which is amazing. And
Yeah.
they're just being recognized by Forbes, I think, today for being 30 under 30.
That's
Um,
incredible.
yeah, and but regardless, hmm. So kind of just lost my point here, but
No, you were just saying, like, how would you approach that? Like, just understanding why there's a stigma, how to address the stigma. I think, one, talking about it more. Um,
right.
Again, just normalizing it. I think that there's so many components at play, honestly. Again, what we're uncertain of or what we're afraid of, we tend to judge. So
Yeah.
I think, like, where there's an insecurity, and again, where you struggle with mental health, of course, there's, insecurity and fear and discomfort in that. So where we're not sure how to handle it or how to help someone or how to conceptualize it, it tends to be judgment or fear based. And naturally, we're going to want to steer away from those things. So I think like not addressing it, like if you have a friend that really struggles, you don't know how to help them, sometimes you distance yourself from them, right? Because
Right.
you're just not sure what to do. So I think like one, normalizing it in terms of you don't always have to know what to do. That's why you get help. And just understanding that like there's nothing wrong with you. It's just an area to attend to in your general health and wellness, right? Just like if you were diabetic, you wouldn't just ignore it and say like I shouldn't be this way. No, of course you're going to attend to that. If you, God forbid, got a cancer diagnosis, you wouldn't just be like, hope it goes away. Like, not everybody
Yeah.
has cancer. No, of course you would attend to that. So like where we understand it, like, and where it's more tangible or more, maybe more widespread, there's a bit more acceptance. And I think with mental health, for a long time, there was a taboo in talking about it. And then again, there's also cultural components to this of
Yeah.
acknowledging emotions or like what's okay to feel and not okay, or even if you're a male that you're not supposed to feel this a certain way, or standards that women are held to with body image. And there's just so many different components at play and what's okay to talk about. I'm using air quotes for those of you who are not seeing me and not okay. So I think that's why mental health really had a run for its money in terms of being able to be normalized as something that is not worth, but essential to attend to.
Yeah. Yeah. You make really good points there, especially in terms of males, like they always
Mhm.
they think that they have to like maintain this like masculine macho image, but really it's okay not to be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
And
not realistic to hold yourself to that standard. And if you do, then there's this internal struggle and it's going to be counterproductive.
exactly. And for those of you who are listening and or watching, I am diabetic. For those of you who are new to the podcast. And yeah, and you recently had a talk at Lynn University in Florida.
Mhm.
Who did you speak to, and what did you notice amongst the group?
So, if you're referring to what I think, because I work pretty closely with the university in certain aspects now, but what I did was I put on a lunch and learn workshop for
Oh,
the Lynn University coaching staff.
oh,
So
gotcha.
basically, I worked with one of the athletic directors and said, "Hey, I would love to get the coaches in one room and just talk about like an introduction to understanding mental health in athletes." I feel like some people treat it as a myth. Some people aren't sure it's there. Some people hope it doesn't happen because they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah,
So really what I did was, and it was a great turnout. And I have to give a shout out to the Lynn staff because they really were so receptive and open to hearing not just what I had to say, but like understanding how it applied to them and their athletes. So really what I did was kind of again help normalize kind of what we're talking about, like mental health
yeah,
and physical health, how they go hand in hand. And again, you're asking these kids, not kids, they're young adults, but you get what I'm saying. You're asking these people to perform at their highest, and you're asking of these physical demands. Here's what's also going on mentally and emotionally, and also seeing them as people, right? Like, yes, of course,
right.
your identity is athlete. At the end of the day, we can't deny that since COVID, the rates have skyrocketed for anxiety and the presence of mental health.
Oh yeah,
And, it's also, unfortunately, we're seeing more again, trigger warning for any of those of you who might be struggling with it, but we're seeing more suicide. We're seeing that 988 being used so much more than the previous number was being used. That's the new suicide hotline number. So it was just kind of like a compassionate reality check of it's not if you have an athlete that struggles with mental health, it's going to be like how you address when you have an athlete that is significantly struggling or starting to struggle. I gave some statistics about how the vast majority that what they're finding now is that if you are going to struggle with mental health, it tends to be before the age of 25, and that's their
right.
group. So it was kind of just understanding and not in like a threatening or intimidating way, like there is this presence and there is something that needs to be done about it, and kind of partnering with them to say like you're not alone in this and no one's expecting you to understand how to problem solve, and here are some things to look out for, here are some resources, here are some ways to open up difficult conversations with your athletes. So it was very much a supportive realm. And, of course, a lot of them it was to talk about like understanding how to connect them with a therapist or how to connect them with my services as well.
Right. And can you talk a little bit about your services?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, I've been in practice as a therapist for a long time now, so I continue that practice. So my main focus right now is performance consultation. And while I do work with athletes, I also work with individuals, teams, groups, companies, basically anyone who is noticing an insecurity or is just acknowledging they want more, want to do better. That's what I do. I help you identify any barriers that are coming up. I help you kind of take inventory, what's going on for you, where there might be some discontentment, and how to kind of reach that next level through
Yeah.
understanding yourself, understanding how your mind works, right? We have to be aware of how these things work to even begin to address it. So it's really understanding that cognitive process. It's understanding how to identify and challenge these limiting beliefs that are seeping into your life without even realizing it.
Right.
So it's really unlocking this next potential. There's basic coping skills involved. Like I said, I really incorporate evidence-based modalities. I don't think it should be something that, oh, this seems like it'll work or this seems like a good idea. I really use concrete evidence-based practices that I've been using for a long time. And I specifically tailor it to you and your needs and what you want to achieve. And we kind of just we restructure and we recalibrate, and we have these very specific measuring points of how you know that you've reached that goal. And I think for a lot of people, that's the missing piece. It's like, I feel better, but like, how do I know I feel better? And what am I doing that's making me feel better? And how do I keep this consistent?
Yeah.
So yeah, the performance consultation piece, I absolutely love it. Again, it's a lot of times it's very driven people that they know they want more, they know they could have more, and they want to pursue that, and they're giving themselves permission to, whether it's you're moving to a new state or you want to show up differently in your relationships, or it could be, performance anxiety giving presentations if you are part of a large company, or you doubt yourself, or you don't ask for what you want because you feel guilty about that. So it shows up in so many different ways. So the outline, I call it, my power performance system, right? So it is very much a method that I follow to help people kind of conceptualize and intervene, but it is so tailored to whatever experience you need.
That's amazing. Yeah, kudos to
Thank
you. My
you.
goodness. You're definitely someone I would have needed when I was in college to say. And
Yeah, and I think it's at all levels too, like college for sure. I think that's like a huge population, and I really enjoy working with the population, but I work with highly competitive athletes and just highly competitive students or the high achieving students in everything from high school to, people who are well established in their careers, that they hit a block, or they're going through a major life transition, or they're no longer satisfied. And there tends to be a lot of judgment that comes up about that. I was like, I should be happy, or I should be fine with where I am. And you don't need to be.
yeah, and I was gonna ask, like you said you were a D1 athlete, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so how do you think or does the whole mental health aspect range from like D1, D2, D3? Do you notice any differences?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say across the board there is a presence. The NCAA has done some studies recently. There's a presence, right?
Right.
I think that the level certainly can have something to do with it. I wouldn't say 100%. I also think the program has a lot to do with it. Sometimes the program is more telling than the actual level, because some, division 1 athletes get more support, or they may have more access to resources, or they may be cared for in a different way. And I'm not saying this is like ultimately true, I'm just kind of speculating here along with you, because I've worked with college athletes at every level. So
Right.
it's not to say that, it's specifically with division 1 athletes that wouldn't be true. It's across the board. I think that, the demands are different between the levels physically. Um, and sometimes that's just reflective of skill set. So what you have to think of it in terms of like how it matches, right? So, maybe a division 3 player, like it's not as prestigious as a level, again, still very high level to play a college sport, but you're playing that because your skill set, you're still giving everything you possibly can. Whereas a Division 1 athlete is still giving everything they possibly can, but
Yeah.
it's at a different level because of your skill set. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes
Like
sense.
scaling it, like it's still
Yeah,
your max, right? So if
right.
you were to put a heart rate monitor on two people, right, and someone's not a runner and someone is, that person that's running a 6-minute mile might be trying way less than the person that's running a 9-minute mile,
Right.
right? So it's all like a kind of perspective here. So it's really just what you're putting into it. Obviously it's the demands from you, but I think a lot of it is the support you may or may not get from your program, the pressures, how you see yourself going into that program, the extent of the transition. If you're coming from, a small program, a small high school program, or your big fish, little pond syndrome. So I think
Yeah,
that's more telling than necessarily the level sometimes.
true. Yeah. And is we're just about almost at time. So is there any last minute things you want to say?
I just wanted to thank you for having me on. Any opportunity to not just talk about mental health, but just normalize that, like how important your mentality is to your success and your well being, and that there's always room for growth. And I think we don't realize we can have more until we actually pursue it. So just giving yourself permission to go there is so important. And, I'm happy I do free consultations. So you can sign up for a consultation with me or reach out. We'll put my information in the show notes. But yeah, so like you can email me and we can have a consultation to talk about if therapy or performance consultation is more appropriate. And, I also would love to offer your audience a little freebie. So it's basically a complete performance appraisal. So it's a nice little quiz you'll get to take and get to kind of conceptualize where you fall within that, how satisfied you are with your performance. And then there's a little kind of accountability tracking performance card so that you can take note of like where it's working for you, where you might want to tweak it. So all you need to do is email me for that, or hopefully it will be up on my website soon. I just kind of revived it. So very happy with how it is.
Awesome.
So yeah, so if you guys want to reach out to me, you can follow me on social media. My email is MIA at levie.life. So MIA at LEVIE.life.
Yes. And once again, that is MIA dot.
At
Oh, at sorry.
Yeah, wait, I realized I tripped up on my words. We'll put it in the
No
show
worries.
notes.
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
a
put it
visual
in
person. I need to see things.
yeah. Yeah, I'm that way
Yeah.
too, so don't worry
It's
about
it's
that.
Mia at Livy.life, and we'll put like how it's spelled and everything in the show notes.
Gotcha. Okay, so this has been Brownies for Breakfast, and thank you so much, Mia. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, April.